And the RNC was a celebration of patriotism. Fortunately enough for the Democrats, they're the ones that are coming off as weird. These are very weird people. These are very tyrannical people. I think that we're not going to see as much of a polling bump as Democratic conventions of years past. I think these weird, and these protests, especially for the Gaza and the Palestinian Israel protesters outside the DNC, is garnering a lot of attention. Trump is an aura. He is an aura. He is a cult of personality, and it's understandable why he is so relatable to the common voter.
Joining me today is writer, commentator, and political strategist Kenny Cody. Kenny, welcome.
Matt, thanks for me, brother. Big fan.
The DNC made headlines even prior to it officially commencing when it was announced that Planned Parenthood was on site offering free vasectomies and abortions. Now, 2 days in, those who have tuned in have endured leftist lies from AOC, Hillary, Joe, Jill, and the Obamas just last night. So despite them previously and rather obviously attempting to brand Trump and J.D. Vance as weird, they're really proving themselves to be a bizarre group of people. What do you make of the DNC so far? Just give us your genuine thoughts or any key takeaways you have up to this point.
A few key takeaways. They've tried to paint J.D. Vance, Trump as weird people, but the RNC was a celebration of patriotism. It was a celebration of the common working man. It was the show of, trying to bring out, free vasectomies, free abortions, on-site and on-demand abortions, as the DNC and as Democrat leftists have done just outside the DNC. And you see this unorganization. You even see journalists come out and say how much better the RNC was organized. The DNC has been so disorganized in terms of allowing people to come in and to cover the event. You're having these people and these journalists come out and say, the RNC was so much more welcoming. The RNC was so much more celebratory. It was so much more positive, and the DNC has very closed doors. But for a party that literally kicked their president out of the race for running for president, the incumbent president literally booting him out of his own office and saying we're nominating somebody else by force. This comes as no surprise. These are very weird people. These are very tyrannical people. And unfortunately, it just seems like that. Well, fortunately for the Republicans, but unfortunately enough for the Democrats, they're the ones that are coming off as weird and as just intrusive on people's households, and not really the same media accessible Democrats of years past.
And given how on brand the DNC has been based on their behavior over the last couple of years, there's really no reason to believe that the last 2 days of the DNC will differ in any meaningful way from the first two. And just prior to the convention, it was already becoming clear that the Kamala honeymoon, if you believe in that, the polling honeymoon, was coming to an end. And from here, I'm curious to hear what you are expecting. Do you believe this out-of-touch display at the DNC will lead to further gains for President Trump, or do you expect Kamala to receive some form of the traditional post-convention bump in spite of their behavior? What are you expecting after this?
I wouldn't be surprised by a very, very short-term polling bump after her acceptance speech. I don't think Tim Walz is going to impress anybody, but you're already seeing the betting market shift in Trump's favor. And that partly becomes from, these rumors of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dropping out of the presidential race, of course, those betting markets shifting in his direction. But, after not one or two of the RNC, you already saw that polling bump for Trump even go up over Harris and over Biden. And you're not seeing that same polling bump within in the first night of the RNC. So I think that we're not going to see as much of a polling bump as Democratic conventions of years past. I think these weird, and these protests, especially for the Gaza and, the Palestinian Israel protesters outside the DNC, is garnering a lot of attention. And especially with this whole stolen valor thing from Walz, with him giving the convention speech, I think it's either tonight or tomorrow. You're having these people kind of come out and say, hey, these military leaders are saying, hey, Walz didn't serve in, overseas military combat. He's lied about his service. That is grabbing the attention lines of somebody who is giving a headline speech, kind of like J.D. Vance did at the RNC, but of positive headlines for Vance and negative headlines for Walz. So I'm not seeing anything happen. I could be absolutely wrong. I didn't see the Harris honeymoon having the same impact as it initially had, but you're seeing things kind of stabilize, and I think you're not going to see the same polling bump as was to be expected because of the selection of Walz and because of Harris's obvious media kind of bunker that she's put herself in over the last few weeks. The media is not going to all out come and praise her as it did the first couple of weeks because of the lack of media availability that the Harris-Walz ticket has sequestered so far.
So you mentioned RFK Jr. Do you expect, well, first of all, how big do you think his base of support actually is, and if he does endorse President Trump as is expected, do you expect his voters to go along, or do you expect them to sort of sit out? What do you make of his impact on the role if he does endorse President Trump?
Well, for a percentage standpoint, I don't think it has that much of a impact. But if you look at the 45,000 vote margin in swing states that Biden won over Trump back in 2020, I think it has a sizable and large impact on the presidential election. I mean, I think a lot of Kennedy's voters will go to Donald Trump. I think that they are looking as, an anti-establishment base. They're an anti-establishment voter base that are voting for Robert F. Kennedy. And, at bare minimum, I don't think a lot of these people are going to be voting for Kamala Harris. I mean, even if they go to Cornel West or go to somebody like Jill Stein or even another third party, you're going to have a lot of them go to Donald Trump. You're going to have the other ones go to more third party candidates that are on the ballot in these swing states. And I think that even if you get, let's just say 0.5, 0.7, or maybe a point of those voters, percentage of those voters that will go to Trump instead of Harris or Kennedy, then I think that kind of sequesters an amount of voters to potentially, get him over the mountaintop in states like North Carolina, states like Arizona and Nevada, where RFK was polling pretty heavily, and even in a state like New Hampshire, where Kenny was polling up to double digits in some New Hampshire polling. And I think if you're able to sequester even let's just say 5 to 4% of those, that can even have a sizable impact because of the thin razor thin margins that Trump had in New Hampshire, both in 2016 and 2020. So I think it may not have necessarily, it's like 4 to 5% of the American electorate that was going to go for Robert F. Kennedy. I think early on people thought it would be double digits. But even if we can get 2 to 3 to even 1% of those that were going to vote for Robert F. Kennedy in swing states, it could have a very, very, very sizable impact on the Electoral College and electoral landslide for Trump, hopefully.
One thing that I have observed, and I don't think enough people are really talking about it, is that the Democrats' actions prove, or they would suggest, that they're not actually interested in winning over voters. Their intense focus on issues like DEI, transgender issues, abortion, as opposed to what's most important to voters this year, such as the economy, immigration, foreign affairs, obviously helps President Trump's standing, which is the most suspicious part of their actions, in my opinion. They're clearly desperate to prevent him from ever returning. Yet they're doing things that are obviously unpopular while he runs on common sense and 4 years of the success that he had as president. So is it that they're so committed to the left-wing agenda that they believe they can sell it? Is it possible they're relying on some of the 20 million, 10 million, 20 million, whatever you refer to it as, illegal immigrants coming in and potentially having an impact on the vote? What do you think is the explanation for them seemingly sabotaging themselves?
I think they're relying on enthusiasm more than they are anything else. I think, with Biden, there was such a just subjective, like I don't want to vote for Biden, but I'm going to have to. And now you have, at least with Harris, somebody who is a fill in the blank Democrat that they're trying to rely on enthusiasm and turnout in order to put them over the hump. You need to have people that were not going to vote for Biden, but will vote for anybody besides Biden. You need to capitalize on that percentage of voters, like you said, the 10 or 20 million that may be enthused to vote for anybody besides Biden that you now have in Kamala Harris. I've told a lot of Republicans over the last month, this is not necessarily a battle of Kamala Harris is now going to win the presidency and, Donald Trump is screwed. We were going from a pre-debate Biden, going against Trump that was like, okay, you feel pretty good about Trump's chances against Biden. Even pre-debate, he was ahead in polling. He was ahead in the RCP average. And then after the debate, it was Trump's going to have a landslide electoral college victory. We're going to have a chance in states like New Mexico, New Jersey, even New York, and some polling. And now we're kind of back with Harris, kind of back to that pre-debate Trump versus Biden aura and that pre-debate kind of attitude. I still think Trump's going to win. I just think that Republicans need to adjust to being used to voting against a commonplace fill-in-the-blank Democrat. And that's the same thing the Democrats are doing. They're trying to capitalize on the far left. It's the same campaign that Kamala Harris ran in 2020 when she was actually running for the Democratic nomination when she got 1.5% of the vote before Iowa. I mean, we're looking at a party who is trying to capitalize on enthusiasm, on voter turnout, and far left issues to get the people who were not going to vote for Biden before to actually come out and vote and to give them a chance. And I think you're seeing that kind of, we saw somebody the other day, I forget who it was. It was one of Kamala's, and a Democratic donor, pollster, saying, these public polls are not the same optimism that we're seeing in our private internal polls. And I think that you're seeing that in the DNC and appealing to these far left, Marxist extremists that they're trying to appeal to, the pro-Palestine, pro-two-state solution Democrats that you're seeing. You're trying to bring in and turn those voters out in a way that Biden was not going to ever turn them out. So I think you're seeing a little bit of panic from the Democrats to bring those voters out and to get them to vote, and probably not only not for Biden, but for the first time ever for Kamala Harris.
And it's clear that people stand with Trump in greater numbers now than at any other point over the past decade, and policy is obviously a big reason for that. But as you wrote, through human events, so is personality. Now, you wrote about Trump's authenticity and Kamala's lack of it. What do you think is currently more powerful in influencing voters' decisions? Is it the personality of the candidates, the policy proposals, or is it a combination of both? What do you think?
I think it's definitely a combination of both. I mean, this attitude that Trump has, like, were you better off when I was president for 4 years, or have you been better off during the Biden and Harris administration? And Trump is an aura. I mean, I saw Bernie Sanders go on Theo Vaughn the other day, one of the most popular podcasts for young men in America. And he said, Bernie Sanders even said, I understand why people are drawn to Donald Trump. He is an aura. He is a cult of personality. And it's understandable why he is so relatable to the common voter. So I think you have to have a combination of that and of policy. And I think Trump, if you just looked at Trump's policy just in terms of just bland, just like saying, okay, what did Donald Trump do while he was president? I don't think a lot of people would view it as extremist. I think there are many Americans who would view it as moderate, but because of the way that Trump comes off in his rhetoric, he gets out these populist nationalists in a way that protects economic security, that has a anti-war foreign policy. But a lot of the common sense solutions are what any moderate would support. But I think that because of the impact of his cult of personality on his policy and the combination of the two, I think that's why people are drawn to Donald Trump. He is now more favorable in polling than he ever has been in his entire career for the last 9 years in politics that he's had, and nearly 10 years in politics that he's had. And I think the reason is that combination of authenticity and of policy proposals. I mean, his policies worked. People were thriving in a Trump presidency, and the only reason that he probably lost was, mail-in ballots, unfortunately, and COVID. I mean, I think his policies were working in the United States, and I think the combination of that with his aura is why he's destined and probably favored to win the presidential election in November.
Let's talk about blackpilling for a moment. You recently wrote about this. It's somewhat fascinating to witness, and I can't determine whether it's due to people buying into the false Kamala honeymoon narrative or if it's due to the past 4 years of nonstop demoralization. But many President Trump supporters are partaking in this. Even though it seems that the momentum is on his side, they seem very pessimistic and fearful about what is to come between now and the election. What do you think is the reason behind this feeling that a lot of voters have? And do you think it will actually have an impact on voter turnout?
Demoralization is a great word, and I think that's been a lot of it. I think when you've seen somebody who's been convicted, you see somebody who's been shot, you see somebody who's been impeached twice, just another thing that's happened to Donald Trump. I mean, the people start to get worn down, and I can understand that, especially on social media, how things can look bleak when you see polls that have Harris up 13 in Michigan. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but I also think there's a big youth impact on this, which is a positive and a negative. I think young men especially are getting more interested in politics than they ever have been, and especially Republican politics. But unfortunately, that comes with people not going through 2016 or 2020. They're just now kind of jumping on board and becoming interested, while Trump's been a candidate in 2024 without going through what many of us went through in 2016, thinking there was going to be an impending loss in 2016. And then in 2020, with the mail-in ballots and COVID impacting, the defeat of Donald Trump, unfortunately enough, I don't think they've been through that. And I think there's kind of this newbie kind of aura to a lot of the blackpilling that we're seeing on the internet. But I do think a lot of it does come from demoralization. A lot of it does come from all these things that have happened to Donald Trump and his supporters. I mean, when you're seeing, pro-life school board members, you're seeing pro-life families getting thrown in prison by the Biden administration, by Merrick Garland, and by a lot of the federal government. And you're seeing, people get attacked like from January 6th. You're seeing this demoralization and demonization of Republicans and conservatives across mainstream media. There does come a point where you get kind of worn out, but I think a lot of it turns into anger, and when anger is turned into votes, that's the most motivating factor. So I think blackpilling is more what I have seen on media, more what I've seen on the internet, unfortunately. And for me being a young conservative commentator, I see far too much of it. And that was just basically a message like, keep the course, try to not pay attention to the false plus 23 Democratic pollsters that are trying to promote polls solely to get the narrative back that this is a competitive race, or that Harris is favored in this race, because betting markets and everything else will prove that she is in fact not.
It's definitely out there. I see it as well. I think anybody who's active on social media sees that there is certainly a faction of people that dive into that. And it's also interesting, the shift you mentioned. In 2016, it seemed like there were polls that gave Trump, 4% chance to win the night before Election Day, and everybody was pretty enthused. And now a poll comes out that shows Trump's only up 4, and people are acting like that's a bad thing for him. So it's definitely interesting to witness. And but before we let you go, we are 75 days away from the next election and just weeks away from early voting starting in many states. Everybody seems to be bracing for some form of electoral chaos between now and then. How do you see the home stretch playing out in the lead up to this election? Are you expecting anything major to come down before now and then, even regarding President Trump's potential sentencing? What are you expecting between now and then?
Well, I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats try to throw him in jail in New York. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all at that. But the good thing about that is it's just enthusiasts and supporters more. I mean, if you look at the polling of when he was, when he was charged, when he was convicted in the past New York trial, all that did was launch his poll numbers up. So I think we may see that, and it may be a mainstream story of him, getting convicted, or them having to win on appeal, or the immunity case protecting him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that necessarily happened, but that's not impacted us. It's arguably helped us, to be quite honest with you. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, but there is the term October surprise. So I'm interested to see the month before the election what kind of things they're going to throw at Donald Trump, or what things come out of Kamala Harris. I mean, I know people say all the time that October surprises only happen to Republicans, but if you look at when Comey looked into the deleted emails of Hillary Clinton in 2016, that was an October surprise that not a lot of us were expecting, and probably shifted a lot of the terms of the election in 2016. So I think just keep on the watch for that. I mean, especially with all this stuff about stolen valor from Walz, and we've not really heard a lot about Harris's VP tenure, so some things can come out about what how she ran the coup or had an impact on kicking Biden out, and that may dissuade a lot of Democratic voters that previously supported the president. That 37% that thought he did a good job as president of the United States. It could have an impact on that. So I think keep your eyes peeled for that. Look to see if there's another attempt to either demoralize Trump, demoralize his supporters. An attempt by the Biden administration to go through a extreme policy that may benefit Americans. Total student loan forgiveness, something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if a policy proposal comes out to try to hand that over to the Democrats as a last ditch effort. But it's something's going to happen. I'm not sure if it's going to happen to the Harris or Trump camp. My guess is it happens to the Harris camp. I don't know why I think that. That's just my inkling, is that something's going to come out about Tim Walz or Kamala Harris as her VP tenure. Something's going to happen. Just keep your eyes peeled out for it.
I think that's sort of funny to point out that we don't. No one sits around saying, "Will something happen?" Everyone sort of just it's a rite of passage in American politics that there will be something that comes out, and we sort of just have to wait and see what it is. So it'll definitely be interesting this year, perhaps more so than any other in the years past. So, Kenny, thank you so much for joining me today and giving us some of your time. We do greatly appreciate it, and we hope to have you back on soon.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much, brother.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any breaking AMAC content. I'm Matt Kane. Until next time.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.